holds the secret decoder ring to all things medical. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been played by 100 years of pharmaceutical propaganda.
Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Have you finally come to the understanding that your medical doctor does not know what's best for you? Have you ever wondered why conventional medical doctors are not concerned with curing anything? If you have answered yes to any of these questions, then you have come to exactly the right place at exactly the right time. This is where the enlightened come for straightforward answers to their health concerns. This is the undiscovered country of science-based, clinically verified, holistic medicine. It doesn't get any better than this. It's time to attempt a cure with Dr. Glidden.
Welcome aboard, everybody. Dr. Peter Glidden, your steadfast advocate for health. Thanks for tuning in and turning on. I have the great pleasure this morning of interviewing Dr. Glen Winkel. Youngevity's representative of the company, one of Youngevity's newest additions, the I-26 company. Very interesting product, shows a great deal of promise, and I thought we would get the information straight from the horse's mouth. So welcome aboard, Dr. Winkle. Could you tell my famous listening audience a little bit about your background so we have a frame of reference to understand this?
Most certainly, yes. Well, I did my undergraduate work at Amherst College, where I actually majored in neurosciences. Then did a 2-year master's at Mount Holyoke College, which is just down the street, literally, where I worked again on the neuroscience program I did previously. And then I went to UC San Francisco, where I applied to the neuroscience department, and they recommended me to go to the anatomy department, turns out, where I was able to do a PhD, kind of an MD program, but didn't just finish with the PhD pretty much. But I was in neuroscience and anatomy simultaneously, which was quite a load for me. But had a blast. Ended up doing my PhD thesis on early developmental biology, which was quite interesting, and my professor is now in Cambridge doing research in human cell research. Was quite cool. But the fun part was that I left there, did a postdoc at UC Davis, working in embryology and electrophysiology stuff with Dr. Richard Nuccicelli, and then came back to UCSF as a biochemist, supposedly. It's funny how that works, but I was assistant research biochemist, and I was in the nephrology department, was a division of the cardiovascular research unit. Did a lot of research on cardiovascular disease, and really high-level stuff. We were collaborating with Jacques Puisiger out of France, published a really fantastic paper on cardiovascular research. The problem was that I started to realize that a lot of the cardiovascular research we were seeing, or a lot of the research we were doing, was not necessarily relevant because the problem was that people weren't taking care of themselves. And so about that time, I really decided I need to talk about the science says one thing, but we're seeing clearly people aren't eating properly, people aren't exercising, they're not getting the proper nutrients, and as a result, they're getting cardiovascular disease. So the message has to go out from the science side and say to people, hey, you guys aren't doing the right thing. Let's change this. Let's fix the problem by changing your diet. Let's fix the problem by getting more exercise, leading a more active lifestyle, things of that sort. So I started going out and doing a lot of public speaking, actually, on that topic, and just teaching people proper nutrition, proper diet, proper exercise is going to make a big difference in the longevity.
That's interesting, isn't it? I don't know if you know this about me, but I matriculated at Williams College.
Really? Oh my gosh, what year?
Yeah, so I was a competitor of yours.
I know.
I lasted at Williams College. I went there straight out of high school. I lasted there for 2.5 years. I was there from 1976 to 1978. Then I took 5 years off, and then ultimately went back to the University of Massachusetts.
At Amherst?
Yeah, to do my pre-med degree, and I graduated from there in 1987. And I actually lived in North Amherst for a while.
Yeah, very nice. How cool.
Small world, yeah.
It is indeed.
All right, very good. So, interesting, right? And now I think that you're doing a lot with sports medicine. What's up with that?
Well, actually, right now, I'm one of the coaches at the Olympic Training Center at the Velodrome here in Colorado Springs. Work a lot with Olympic athletes, Paralympic athletes, and then I call them casual weekend warriors that come out and want to learn how to ride a bike. So I get to work a lot of quite a wide range, from beginners to really high-level athletes. And you see all sorts of things out there, literally, on what they're eating. And so my goal is to change their diet, modify exercise program, teach them proper technique on how to ride a bike. This is not well known. There's a proper way to ride a bike and an improper way to ride a bike, which can cause long-term disability issues. So that's what I'm doing. Plus, I'm also working at Colorado College, where I started the first collegiate speed skating team in the U.S. And we're building a collegiate speed skating program now throughout the United States, trying to bring speed skating into the collegiate sport arena.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, a lot of fun. I bet that's a lot of fun. Well, where did you grow up?
I grew up in New York, actually, on Long Island.
Really?
And I lost my New York accent when I went to high school in Massachusetts. I went to a little private school called the Governor's Academy. And they quickly corrected my accent when I said, Boston? I go, no, it's Boston. So,
what was the academy that you went to?
well, the actual name at the time was called Governor Dummer Academy, GDA.
Yeah.
But over the years, they changed the name to the Governor's Academy because it sounded funny to go to the Dummer School.
Yeah, that's right. Isn't that funny? That's interesting.
Yeah.
Well. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you here this morning. Now,
Yeah.
I think one of the latest iterations in your career has been working with the company that makes the I-26 product. Is that right?
It is. It's been about 20 years now, actually. Almost 20 years.
Wow. So how did that start? How did that evolve?
Well, it's funny. Back in the day, I got a phone call from a gentleman who was a network marketing guy who was trying to sell me on this egg product. And I was like, and he started talking about what it could do. And I was kind of like, from an egg? I didn't quite get it. But this guy had the smarts to know that he contacted Dr. Helen Greenblatt, who worked with DuPont at the time, and said, you need to call this guy. He's a scientist. I can't explain it to him, but you probably can. So she left me a voicemail, and I thought, as a professional courtesy, I'll call her back and chat with her. And in that conversation, we had a good discussion about the product, what it was, and she convinced me to kind of give it a good shot. So I did. And this is now 20 years since, and I think in my repertoire, it is probably the most important thing I've added to my diet beyond everything else I've tried because of what it does that nothing else on the market does. And I started, as an athlete, noticing tremendous differences. I mean, I'd get into bike races, and I'd be racing against guys, and I'm wondering why they're going so slow. Literally, why is everyone going so slow? I mean, we can go faster than this. And so I started driving the pace, and I dropped everyone. And I'm like, what's wrong with you guys? And I didn't realize this product was giving me tremendous amounts of energy, faster recovery, greater strength, and a greater mental clarity. So when I was racing, I was like on top of my game. I was like, I felt powerful, and I raced that way as a result.
Well, you're speaking like a naturopath now, right? Because one of the first things that we're taught in naturopathic medical school is when in doubt, treat the gut, right?
Yes.
Because, right, from the naturopathic perspective, the body is a whole system of interrelated parts. And as science progresses, they're finding a very interesting relationship between the biome of the gut, the central nervous system, and the brain.
Yes, indeed it is, yeah.
And they're showing that actually, it's kind of like you have a brain in your gut because there's such an intimate connection between the two. So basically, one of the oldest naturopathic maxims here, right, is if you make the digestive tract healthy, if you make the gut healthy, then you're going to be way ahead of the game as far as keeping the rest of the body and making the rest of the body healthy. That's just fascinating.
It's ironic, too, and think about this, especially for athletes. It's the one area no one even talks about. I mean, everyone's talking about external type stuff, the bicycles, the equipment, about training protocols and everything else. No one talks about the gut at all. Yeah. And in reality, you think about this, all your nutrition comes into the mouth and comes into the gut, and if it doesn't get into your body, it's not there. You can be eating the finest diet in the world at the Olympic Training Center. If your body's not digesting it properly, it has no effectiveness whatsoever.
Yeah, it's interesting, which is one of another naturopathic maxim. It's not what you swallow, it's what you absorb.
Exactly.
Right? And this is one of the reasons that we're very big proponents of a gluten-free diet because ostensibly the gluten protein is difficult, if not impossible, for most people's stomachs to digest. And so when you swallow a gluten protein and it passes through the stomach, it's an intact chain of amino acids rather than individual amino acids.
Right.
And when the villi of the stomach attempts to absorb that intact chain, it becomes damaged. And it's the villi whose job it is to absorb nutrients into the body.
That's right.
So ironically, theoretically, right, the more gluten-containing grains that somebody eats over time, the more difficult it is for their body to absorb nutrients. And, from our point of view, there aren't enough nutrients in the food anyway.
Right.
And nutrient deficiencies are at the root cause of most chronic diseases, if not all. And so it's one of life's greatest ironies that, whole grains, from our point of view, are one of the worst foods to eat. And it goes right back to just what you were talking about, the health of the gut, the ability of the digestive tract to digest stuff, and then to absorb it into the bloodstream. So, we talk about cardiovascular support, and we talk about immune system support, and we talk about musculoskeletal support and bone and joint support, right? The only thing that really we talk about when we talk about gut health, typically speaking, is, well, clean up your diet and take some probiotics, right? Or maybe some anti-inflammatory herbs for a little while, whatever.
Correct.
So how does the I-26 program or product work in the gut, and how does it work, and what does it do? What does it do?
Well, that's why it's so unique, because when you think about nutrition, you think about supplements, vitamins, minerals, essential fatty acids, things of that sort. The I-26 is neither of those things. Essentially, from the basic point, it's egg powder. It's an egg. But the key thing is that there are antibodies in this egg powder that are specifically targeted against intestinal pathogens. Now, the reason why that's important, because a lot of people don't realize you can take probiotics all day long, and the idea is adding good bacteria to the GI tract, which is really good, very important. We see good results with probiotics. However, if you have certain pathogenic bacteria like Salmonella, Streptococcus, Klebsiella, Pseudomonas that are living inside your GI tract, and they're well entrenched in there, adding what I call the good guys to GI tract isn't going to eliminate the bad guys. They're still going to be there. They're still going to be causing inflammation. They're still going to be stimulating the immune system. They're still going to be causing leaky gut syndrome and issues with the lining of the GI tract. So you don't take them out by adding good bacteria. The I-26, it comes in specifically targeting those pathogenic bacteria, and as a result, taking them out specifically, so they're gone. When you take them out, you eliminate them, then you can actually create a healthy flora, which is something that nothing else does that, to this market. That's what, the name itself, I-26, because it's targeted against specifically 26 different intestinal pathogens.
In the human bio.
Human body, yes. Exactly.
Yeah, that's interesting. So from the chicken to the human, that's an interesting phenomenon, right? So and it's a point well taken, and we talk about this all the time, right? That the digestive tract is like a sardine box, and there's only so much room in there. There's only so many sardines you can fit in there, and at any moment in time, there's the good stuff and then there's the bad stuff.
Yeah.
And the intention here, right, is to not only increase the good stuff, but also to kill the bad stuff.
Exactly.
And it's the reverse of what happens when somebody takes an antibiotic. So, for instance, you take a broad-spectrum antibiotic, the good stuff, the bad bacteria are often eliminated dramatically, but not all of them. And so now there's a lot of room in the box, and the stronger species survives and gains a foothold and creates more territory. And it's usually the bad stuff that come back.
That's correct.
And then it's a problem. So in addition to, anti-inflammatory therapeutics with diet or with herbal medicine or colloidal silver or whatever, and probiotic and prebiotic therapeutics, now you're talking about a specific product, the intention of which is to upregulate the human immune system so that it eliminates the bad stuff from the box.
Well, it does that in addition, it does two things, which is quite interesting, which is, this is why I like the product being so unique, because on the one hand, the antibodies inside the egg powder eliminate the pathogenic bacteria. That's part one. But interestingly enough, we found that in the actual prep itself, there are two factors called cytokine activating factor and also cytokine inhibiting factor. And these large proteins, what they do, one activates cytokine activity, means it actually ramps up the immune system, creating greater immunity. But the other half of that is that it actually turns down the immune system. So if you have inflammatory conditions, if you have allergy-type situations, it tones it down, and it does this simultaneously.
Isn't it amazing how that happens? Like, the body has intelligence, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And, this speaks to the whole concept in botanical medicine of adaptogenic herbs.
Right.
Right, and scientists, mainstream scientists, have a hard time wrapping their head around this concept because they're so reductionistically inclined. Well, how can this one substance, this one herb, both upregulate and downregulate metabolic systems in the body? How is that possible? Well, it's possible because there are different components, metabolic components in the product, and the body knows what's best.
Yeah.
So we give the body a leg up, and if the body needs to upregulate things, it does it. If the body needs to downregulate things, it does it. And bada bing, bada boom, healing sets in. I mean, that's just remarkable. So from your clinical experience, right, how long have you been using the I-26?
Almost 20 years now.
20 years,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you've seen improved athletic performance.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What other types of things have you seen people benefit from?
I've seen one of the key ones. My best friend's son developed leukemia, and Timothy was so sick that what happened was he couldn't be maintained on chemotherapy. His blood counts would drop below 0.5. He'd be at Baylor. He'd be sick as a dog, and they're afraid we're going to lose him. And I was visiting him for a bike race one day, and I said, "Hey, I just found this new product. Let's give Timothy a couple servings a day, see what happens." And within about 4 or 5 days, his blood counts went to near normal levels. They put him back in chemotherapy, and he maintained normal levels during chemo, which never happened before, for the whole course of chemotherapy. So it was remarkable how it supported his immune system during that approach, because he was, obviously, they're going to choose a very standard approach for leukemia, which made sense. But long-term, he did very well in the program. That was my first, like, wow, that's incredible. It was such a dramatic breakthrough. So I started seeing all these areas, like people. A good friend of mine had Wegener's disease, which was inflammation of the major arteries, the epithelial lining of the arteries. And we had no idea whether it was going to work for Calvin. And he was in a wheelchair. He was on dialysis 3 days a week. He was not walking, obviously. They put a lift in his house to get up the front stairs to his house. And let's just try it, see what happens. So within about 2 weeks, I got a call from his neighbor. The neighbor lives behind them, because Calvin had been in a wheelchair. And he looked out in the backyard one day and saw Calvin lifting 12 by 12 railroad ties. Seriously, to fix Bonnie's garden, because the railroad ties had fallen down. And he's like, "What are you doing?" Because he had seen him in a wheelchair last time. Now he was up actually getting about. He was able to lift things and move things.
That's remarkable, isn't it? We see things like this all of the time with properly applied holistic therapeutics.
Correct.
Now, because this product specifically targets the gut.
Yes.
I mean, have you seen people with irritable bowel or celiac or Crohn's disease? How does this tend to affect them?
Well, Crohn's disease is a really nasty one because it's an autoimmune type situation. And I had a good friend of mine who, her sister had 3 bowel resections. She was a nurse, and she couldn't eat very much food anymore. She was in pain all the time, suffering, and she was almost suicidal, you have to say. That's how bad it was. And she just basically stopped eating. She was losing weight dramatically. So I recommended she try the program. And it was about 2 weeks later, and what happened was someone in her sister's Bible study called me up and said, "See what's happened with Chezzy?" I go, "What?" She says, "Oh, she's doing fantastic." So Chezzy literally is able to eat almost all food sources again, no problems with eating food, much better health, energy was back, felt fantastic, and doing great. And so I've seen this happen time and again with Crohn's disease, irritable bowel, intestinal colitis, the whole thing. It seems to heal the gut so well that a lot of these inflammatory conditions seem to go away.
Now, that's a very interesting thing to talk about, and this whole concept of autoimmunity is one of my pet peeves, and, there's something going on here, and the conventional medical doctors see somebody with a Crohn's disease or lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, and sometimes, not all the time, sometimes they see the presence of an antibody in the blood.
Right.
And then they make the assumption that it's the antibody that's causing the disease.
Correct.
And that's never been proven, and the antibody, the factor is not present in everybody who has these, quote, autoimmune diseases, right? So the therapeutic methodology then inside of this reductionistic medical approach is to suppress the immune system.
Right.
Because I woke up on Monday and all of a sudden my digestive tract decided to eat itself alive, right? Or my joints decided to destroy themselves, or my skin decided to destroy itself, or whatever. So it's entirely possible, and I am of the opinion that the antibody that's present is not the result of the disease.
Right.
Or it is not causing the disease. It's the result of the disease.
Right.
That there's chronic inflammation happening in the body, that the body is generating, tissue in the body is dying because of the chronic inflammation. And so the body calls in the cleanup crew to eliminate the dead tissue, and that's when you see the presence of these antibodies. Now, it doesn't make sense to me that somebody, if it truly was an autoimmune disease where the immune system has upregulated and it's attacking itself, it does not make sense to me that a therapeutic which upregulated the immune system would be effective. Right. Which is what the I-26 does. That's how it works. It upregulates the immune system. So, But
it also downregulates too. That's the interesting thing. That's why I see it working. So I see in cancer patients, it will upregulate to deal with the cancer, but it will downregulate to deal with asthma on the other side. Or in this case, it was an allergy situation for one of my friends. Yeah. So what I see quite interesting is that it's not just upregulating, it is really normalizing activity in the immune system, which I like a lot. And like I say this all the time, autoimmune disease, prednisone. It's always prednisone.
Yeah.
And then, many times some of the autoimmune diseases are actually caused by viral infections, which means the viral infection part takes over. So there's a lot of issues right now. If anything ever happens to me, no prednisone, period. None. That stuff's nasty.
Yeah, and it's such a Max Planck, right, the guy that discovered quantum physics, right, he was very outspoken, and one of my favorite Max Planck sayings is, science changes one funeral at a time, right? Which means that, this generation of scientists or doctors or research people comes in inside of a certain methodology.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for them to give that up as they go along, even in the face of information which is contrary to that methodology, right? Because there's too much cognitive dissonance there. We just can't give up, our ideation. And this is one of the most frustrating things from my position as a naturopath, almost 30 years of clinical experience now. We see remarkable things happen, remarkable healings most of the time. And I'm still waiting for a phone call from the medical doctor of a patient who'd been suffering with asthma for 5 or 7 years, or type 2 diabetes for 5 or 7 years, or arthritis for a long time, and not getting any better under their care. Right. And then they do something outside of the box with naturopathic medicine or holistic therapeutics, and they recover.
Yep.
And they go back to the conventionally trained medical doctor, and you would expect the doctor to call, Dr. Glidden, how did you do that? That's the most remarkable thing I've ever seen.
Never happens.
It never happens.
Yeah, I know.
And this is the problem that we're up against here. And this is why I'm such a fan of companies that have holistic or products that interface in the body in this way, that stimulate healing in this way, and that then go the extra yard and actually prove it with some type of clinical study. So let's talk about that.
Yes.
So what research has the company that produced I-26 been involved with?
Well, actually, it's been researched on all different fronts. You have to be careful. Sometimes they did a study back in it was a military study, and they found that people, as they enter the military, their cholesterol levels go way up. They found that when they were on the hyperimmune egg product, the cholesterol levels stayed the same. So the way they could phrase the study without saying it lowered cholesterol levels, they said it maintained normal cholesterol levels in an environment where it normally would raise. So it's very nice, very well crafted study. They saw dramatic results with people that had, I would call it inflammatory joint conditions rather than calling arthritis, because we understand that it doesn't treat disease, but by normalizing immune activity, it will help in situations with these inflammatory conditions. So whenever I have an itis, whether it's pancreatitis or whether it's arthritis, that's an inflammatory condition. I can almost invariably say that the I-26 will help people with inflammatory conditions. It's kind of a gray area sometimes, but for the most part, it really does do that time and time again. Anytime inflammatory conditions, it does seem to quell the immune system quite a bit so that there's less inflammation. And it may be happening from the GI activity, because we know if your GI is dramatically inflamed, that inflammation spills over throughout the whole body.
Right.
I hear people talking about saying if you have a dental carie and inflammation in the teeth, for example, it can affect cardiovascular disease, because we know inflammation and cardiovascular disease are closely related as well, too.
Right.
So that kind of stuff is that quelling inflammation, whether it works through the immune system or it works through the GI tract, is calming down inflammation, and therefore all inflammatory conditions seem to respond very well to the program.
It's really, really interesting, and if we go back to the athletes, right, and your own personal experience with you're blowing past the pack, and the only thing different you did was the I-26 program.
Yeah.
I would guess that at that time you were not having the experience of any overt trouble with your gut.
No.
Like you weren't having pain, you weren't having cramping, you weren't having inflammation, you weren't having diarrhea, right? So no overt inflammatory stuff going on down there that you were aware of, and yet the product produces results which are measurable and repeatable. It's fascinating to me how all of this works. And I got to tell you, when I'm appointed Surgeon General of the United States,
all right,
it's stuff like this that all the research money is going to go to. Because, I mean, wouldn't you think that if you were if you were just an open-minded scientist and you saw stuff like this, it would be like an aha moment and you would want to investigate that?
Exactly.
Yeah, more people, I think, are getting on this bandwagon. My hat goes off to you, especially, because, I'm a naturopathic doctor, and we kind of expect naturopathic doctors to be talking about things like this. I mean, that's what we do. But you don't expect a conventional doctor or a PhD research guy to be talking about things like this. I really have to give you a lot of credit and a lot of kudos here, because to stand up inside of your scientific community and, research things like this.
Right.
I mean, I would expect you've been the subject of of a little bit of
lots of harsh criticism.
Professional criticism, right?
Yes, indeed.
Well, the truth will out, and it's what gets me up in the morning, and it's just been a pleasure to meet you and to talk to you, and I look forward to working with you in the future in order to make more people aware of the real things that they can do, science-based, clinically effective, clinically verified therapeutics to support and promote the structure and function of the human body. Dr. Winkle, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.